Resolve me, my Father, stick. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. I'll start my quick talk, and I hope it is quick, because one thing people will tell you, I have no sense of time whatsoever, so I apologize in advance. The story is told in ancient Egypt that in a certain festival of the god of the Nile, that the priest would come up before the great altar of the god Hapi of the Nile, and he would offer his offering. And as soon as he would come up to offer his little offering and just about to start his prayers, a rat came out and would promptly snatch a piece out of the offering and about to run away. One or two times, and the priest got really frustrated, so he decided, he looked around and he found the little fan hanging there inside in his sanctuary that he was offering, and whenever the rat would show up, he would try to smack it right on the head and try to get it away. Didn't really work that well, so later he was looking around somewhere in the temple courtyard and he found a cat running around. And so he caught the cat and he put it in the sanctuary so that when the rat finally comes in, that maybe the cat will catch the rat. But then he was presented with another problem. So the cat started to run around and get a little too excited. So he looked around, and sure enough, there was a little golden chain hanging around. So he took the golden chain, tied it to the cat, and got the cat to sit down. And then basically the cat could only go around for a certain radius around the altar. And then whenever the rat would show up, the cat would finally catch it, problem solved. But every year that same problem would happen, and so it became sort of a little habit that the priest got into. He would have his little fan standing there, and at a certain part of the prayer, whenever the rat seemed to come out, he would smack it right next to the offering, and then the cat would start running around, and then he'd hold the cat down with a special golden chain. And with a couple of years, people got a little used to it. A couple of years later, the priest died, and for some reason the rat didn't show up, but the priest that came after him looked at what was going on, and then he saw the cat tied in a nice golden chain, and he saw that the cat was black. The cat died. The guy figured that maybe the cat had to be black for some reason, so he looked around trying to find a black cat. Then he got the black cat, and then he had to find the golden chain, and he put the golden chain, and then the fan broke. He started to figure out, why am I doing all of this? And nobody actually told him. Okay, of course he figured this out by now. I'm making this whole thing up. What are we trying to... What am I trying to talk about? For a lot of people, true or false, or truthfully or wrongfully, people feel that there's a lot of stuff that we do in the church from a ritual perspective where, why are we doing it? Buna stands and he has whatever. Let's start with something simple. The Sharia, the censer. And at a certain point in the liturgy, Abuna puts some incense in the censer, and then the smoke fills everything, and then Abuna starts walking around, and he starts shaking that thing everywhere, right? And everybody's trying to figure out, what on earth is he doing, right? And there's lots of gestures that we see in the church. Okay, let's not even forget about gestures. You walk into the church, and here it is. You have all these icons, and you have, all this decorative stuff, and we are struck by the notion that, why do I really need to do all of this? And so that's sort of what we want to look at for the next couple of minutes. Before we go, from my understanding, over the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months, whenever we get together, we might want to just go over something that relates to, the liturgy or stuff. So before we actually go into the liturgy itself, I thought it prudent today just to go over some of the ideas of when we do something, how do we do it? This idea of rituals and rites. So what are our rituals mean? What are liturgical rituals? It comes from a Greek word, taxis, right? Incidentally, if you ever heard the Arabic word tas, everybody keeps talking about tas, this, tas, that. It comes from the Greek word taxis. So taxis is basically, rituals or order or a system. And our church rituals encompass a whole load of things. So there's how the services are ordered and the way we do it and the system, the prayers, there's a lot of symbolic gestures. Okay, what's the basic, most simple, symbolic gesture we do in the church? Someone can think for a second there. Most important, simple thing we do as a gesture. Yes. Perfect. The sign of the cross. Took the youngest person in the room to figure that one out. Yes, the sign of the cross. It is a symbolic gesture, but yet is an act of worship, right? And we'll think about that in a minute, right? Church architecture, liturgical tools and the utensils, right? You know, the censer and the paten and the chalice and the box that's here and all that sort of stuff. These are all tools, and right? And then finally the vestments, even what Abuna wears and the deacons wear, all of that is an expression of our worship. So all these things are done, and this is the thing. The ritual, when we put in our mind, anything that's a liturgical ritual is basically an expression of our worship. And the biblical basis for it is very simple. St. Paul says in his letter to the Corinthians that all things be done decently and in order. And you will notice, and that is the whole idea of taxis. That's the whole point of order and rites and rituals. That everything needs to be organized in a certain way. So when you read in the letter of St. Paul to Corinthians, and he's speaking about people who were, you know, speaking in tongues and prophesying and doing stuff, and it got so disorderly that the whole reverence of the worship experience in the church, even in the New Testament time, was sort of a big mess. So he told them, you know, we have to do it in groups, people have to take turns, people come out, someone says something, and then after that, when someone says something in tongues, someone would translate, and everything has to be organized, because we're not a church that would find ourselves just being indecent and messy and so on and so forth. So that is the main basic. At the core level, everything we do is done so that things can be in order. However, another part of that is, again, we got to think about worship and all these rituals and rites. When we say, again, we have the icons, we have the iconostasis over here, you have the candles, you have the, like I said, the incense and all that sort of stuff. There's another very fundamental reason why we have all of that. This is something that's sometimes lost outside the Orthodox Church. Our worship is not some sort of intellectual experience. Think that, you know, I just need to sit in my pew and, you know, think holy thoughts, therefore I have prayed. I just need to, you know, sing with everybody and think about the glory of the Lord, and that way I have worshipped, and I could do it so simply when I'm sitting on my seat. From the Orthodox perspective, our worship is really physical. Why is it physical? Simply because we're physical. We're human beings. We're flesh and blood, in addition to our soul and our mind and our heart, right? And we will be going to heaven with our bodies. We're not going to heaven as disembodied souls. So the very fact is, physically, that's the way God created us. God created us as physical beings. He didn't create us as angels, right? So therefore, when we go into the church, everything we do combines what we are in its completeness. So yes, when we worship, we have to understand what we're doing. Our emotions get involved, our mind is involved, but also everything physical inside of us that's in us needs to be involved as well. So you see that all our senses get engaged in this sort of thing. So you see the icons and the actual building and the clerical vestments, and you see the incense and the smoke rising up, and you see the candles and the light that engages, you know, your sense of sight. And then you hear the hymns and the prayers, and that you're hearing it, and someone's saying something, and you see again the incense, and you smell it, and you touch. You know, how many times have you seen people, especially the older generation? You see this. Someone goes in, they kiss the icon, right? It's an act of veneration. Abuna goes up and he kisses the veil of the sanctuary, and then Abuna goes inside and he kisses the altar, and it's all physical, touch, and, you know, even taste. That's why we take communion, right? You're tasting, you're eating it, right? And you're drinking from the chalice. So all your senses, right? It's like a big mosaic of everything, and you take it in with your whole self. And that is at the core of what all these rituals are meant to do. It's meant to engage each and every single one of us when we are in the liturgy or whatever prayer that we're doing in the church. And you'll notice everything is physical. Abuna doesn't just pray over somebody's head to be healed. He gets oil, and he anoints the oil on the person who's sick. When we bless the people, we bless some water, then we sprinkle it on everybody, right? So everything is physical, and everything has a meaning because we are physical beings. But that's not, again, to the detriment of the spiritual part, which we'll get into a bit more detail in a bit. Okay, so a couple of quick questions, true or false? And I will ask you to answer and tell me why for each one. So question number one, or true or false, God doesn't care about rituals. But if you're going to say true or false, I need a good reason why. And how much time do I have? So I need to time myself.
3 minutes.
3 more minutes. Okay, so each one is going to take a minute. So God doesn't care about rituals. True or false, and why? I'm going to pick someone. All right. I'm going to pick somebody that I know so I don't embarrass myself. But someone's got to step up. Okay, come on, guys. Give me an idea. Like, there's no way you can get this absolutely wrong, okay? So, like, someone's going to give me an idea. Yes?
False, because like part of the ritual is like God sees like putting in this effort that you're doing for the ritual. So I feel like God would care if you are putting that effort into the ritual.
Okay, but here's my question then. If that is true, am I doing... Okay.
Okay, so it's false because, like, I think that God would care that you are taking the time to do the ritual, and that, like, you're doing like a step towards like getting closer to that.
So, if I'm doing the ritual, do I need to do it in that certain way, the way it was set to please Him? So and I think the priests have figured this out earlier. I've only been ordained a year, and they figured they can't pin me down, so I'm always jumping around too much. So is the volume better already? Okay. Okay, so then that's a little easier. I'm still holding something. No, I got to put this somewhere. Okay, that's better. No, so I still can't figure this one out. Every time I come here, I never figure this one out. Okay, better? Okay. Okay. Better? Thank you. I can always count on Naveen to help me out with these things. Okay. So again, I just want to come out with that thing. Okay, so God, that's a good point, but here's another point I wanted to take you through very quickly. Put in mind, when you read the Old Testament, God actually did care. When you read in Exodus, you find that God descended on the mountain and talked to Moses, and he spent a lot of time explaining to Moses, here's how you build the tabernacle. You'll make it look like this. I want this kind of fabric and this kind of wood, and you will build the tent looking like this. And then when you build the Ark of the Covenant, I want it to make it look like this, with angels facing this way, and you shall put gold in this thing and gold in that, and you'll build the statues looking like this. And he literally almost gave Moses the entire blueprint of how to build the tabernacle, right? And then you look at Leviticus. It's a whole book in the Old Testament, and it's all about when you pray, you're going to do this, and when you pray, you're going to do that, and when you offer an offering, you do it this way, and you take this kind of animal, not that kind of animal, and so on, and so on, and so on, right? So, in the Old Testament, God put a lot of emphasis into the ritual. Then then maybe we can argue and say, well, okay, this Old Testament stuff, now we don't have sacrifices anymore. Christ came, it's the New Testament, we need nothing of this. You read in the New Testament then, right in the book of the Acts, you find, for example, John and Peter, right? St. John and St. Peter, the disciples, when you read around the story of the raising of the paralyzed person at the gate of the temple, right? What were they doing that day? They were going to pray the ninth hour. So they were going to pray according to the rituals of the old Jewish people, right? And then you find a lot of references all throughout the New Testament where you see stuff like St. Paul says, okay, when I come, I will organize some of these things. And then as we alluded to earlier as well in Corinthians, when you get together, everything has to be according to an order. So this whole idea of rituals, okay, is not, and that brings me to the second point. I sort of answered that second point right now, but because I realized that we're sort of running short on time. So we got to understand one thing. God doesn't need the ritual itself just for us to appease him. However, God cares that we do things orderly and in a decent way. Okay, that last question, let's look at it, and then you guys tell me what you think. Okay, if, say, I'm going to make this a tough question. The church says 9 hours of fasting before you come into communion. Okay? And I know the priests are not going to like me for this one, but I'm going to say it anyway. All right? So you show up. Okay, I'm not going to say anything about what happened before or state fact. Someone walked in and they're going to have communion and they didn't fast the exact 9 hours. Sin or no sin? And why? Sorry? Well, we got to ask the question. We got to understand what we're doing.
Say it in the microphone so we can hear.
Okay, let me put it another way as well. Okay, it's not just the fasting piece. Okay, we walk into church and, okay, it's 10 p.m. and, sorry, not 10 p.m. Let's say it's 4 p.m. Okay, and we decide to pray Compline. All right? Who cares? Doesn't matter. Just pick anything from the Agbeya and pray it. Sin or no sin? Have we committed something horrible or not? And someone needs to tell me why. Yes. Okay.
Use the microphone. Use the microphone.
Prayer is prayer either way. It doesn't necessarily need to matter what hour it is. I mean, if it's meant to be in the morning hour, fine, but like if you prayed at night.
So what was the point then?
Well, no, I mean, it was like, because like you were saying back then, in the apostles' time, they were, going to the temple to pray at the 9th hour, and even like some, other cultures will even do that where they'll have specific time periods. And, but like in this modern time, like as long as you pray, it doesn't really matter what time it is.
Again, if it doesn't really matter, then why are we doing it the way we structured it?
Well, I think it was sort of structured for the liturgy too, because like I know in the liturgy, we usually play from the 3rd or 6th hour. Mm-hmm. But okay. Like when we're at home, like are you, like for real, are you seriously gonna, first hour of the clock, you're gonna get up? Maybe in the morning that makes sense, but like every hour, are you gonna, actually get up and pray the hour?
Okay, we'll keep that point. Anybody else want to add to that? So we're saying in essence, no. Breaking the ritual is not a sin. Anybody want to add to that or comment on it? Okay, in the interest of time, I will just say 2 comments, all right? In essence, that's sort of correct. Breaking the ritual is not a sin. However, there are 2 sins that might be associated with it that you have to be wary of. God doesn't like carelessness. All right? God doesn't like carelessness. If someone breaks the ritual or rite, and at the essence of why they did it was because they're just being careless, or who cares? This stuff doesn't matter anyway. Or, so what? Okay? Then there's a story, for example, when you read in the Old Testament, where some of the priests dare to offer the incense where they were barely even sober. Right? And God's response was very fierce at that point. Why? I believe fire came and burnt them up or something. Right? Why? Because they were careless. Right? So when we come forward to God and we're offering something everything that we're doing is, at the end of the day, it's an offering. If we're doing it while we are careless, while we are negligent, the breaking of the ritual isn't the sin. It's the negligence and the carelessness, which is the sin. So that's the first part. Second part is sometimes pride, or, a sense of hubris and haughtiness. Like, what do I need these rituals for? I know better than everybody. Like, this is silly. I don't need to do this, right? So a lack of humility in approaching what the church has ordained for us, that's a sin, because at the essence, there is pride. Why do I need the Agbeya? I can pray better than what's written in there. It's a comment we sometimes hear a lot, right? Or why do we need to say this hymn on Good Friday? Or why do we have to do it this way? Very simply, the church, in a matter of experience of around 2,000 years, has figured out that this is the stuff that makes saints. You want to come in and say, hey, I want to pray, I want to put my mouth where my heart is, and I want to say the stuff that I feel. The church dares to tell you, put your heart where your mouth is. I'm teaching you the words to pray, so put your heart in what you're saying, and then you will learn something. Don't be proud. Don't be foolish in your own pride and think that you know better. The church takes this experience, and again, this is the final point I want to leave you with. The rituals and the rites of the church in general, we are not doing it to appease God or doing something because we have to do it this way, or one of the most famous sentences is because the magic won't work. So basically, if we don't do the ritual properly, something's going to happen wrong inside. It's not going to work inside the altar, and God forbid, it's not, the sacrament's not going to happen. It's not like that. It's not a hocus pocus kind of a magic trick that we have to do every single move so that the magic works. It's not like that. But we do it because, and again, it's not because it's some sort of, this is our culture and we have to preserve our culture. It's not just that either. Our rituals and our rites, in essence, are a spiritual expression of our faith. And it is the collective experience of the church over, how many years again? 2,000 years, right? So when we accept that and we come into it with humility, but at the same time with the spirit of understanding, that we try to understand why we do what it is that we do, and we put our heart and our mind in where our actions and our mouth is, then we reap the spiritual benefit of all of that. And glory be to God forever and ever. Amen. Any questions or comments before we close?